You're listening to the Beyond Mommy Dearest podcast, where we talk about growing up with narcissistic moms, how it shapes your nervous system, your relationships, and your sense of self, and how to heal without shame. I'm your host, Nolani Pearl Hernandez. Today's episode is sponsored by plant-powered body care that actually works. Today I'm sitting down with Heather Cypel, an intuitive psychic and energy body specialist, to explore how our emotional patterns, our psyche, and even our physical experiences are shaped by a deeper energetic blueprint we carry. All right. Today I am here with my guest, Heather Cypel. I'm so excited to dig into her specialties. And I'm going to ask my first question, which is, some of the things that you shared is that as a child, you were really deeply interested in theology and spirituality and existentialism. So, what do you think that younger version of you um, was already sensing and really searching for?
Well, I guess when I was younger, I would have framed it via the lens of religion. I would have said that I had a heart for God
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that I was just in search of that connection with spirit and deeper meaning. And I had my first spiritual awakening when I was four. And it kind of opened up that connection with spirit. And I always had a natural curiosity. And of course, I went through the lens of theology. We went to church a lot. So it was really natural.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I was pondering and just very, very curious. And I remember that by the time I was in third grade, maybe 9 years old, I no longer could ask those deeper theological
Hmm.
or existential questions to any of the adults because the answers that they were giving were more rudimentary than where I was already.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I just continued that way of education, right? Just correct, direct connection with spirit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Every single question and pondering that I had was eventually answered.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it wasn't like a Google search
Right,
instant,
right.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
but over time, the biggest, deepest, most, curious or painful types of situations that I would put out there and really try to understand, it's like my system would just automatically know over time
Hmm.
what how things worked. And
Hmm.
so I guess what I was searching for really was a way to navigate life and
Hmm.
maybe to make it a little less painful.
Yeah. And, a lot of the women or even people who are listening to this podcast have experienced a really severe trauma in that connection with their foundation. And so I think, one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on is because there are several different ways for you to connect
Oh,
and
yeah.
several different ways for people to find what helps them on the path move forward. And yours is one of those ways. So I really wanted, not to make a pun of it, but that awakening to happen in them in a
Yes.
different kind of sense. And when did you really realize that you perceive the world differently than other people did?
I think probably in those early elementary ages, I think I always kind of had a sense that one of these things is not like the other.
Hmm.
And I was born into a family where 90% of the people in my family have the energy body archetype that's, namely considered like the strongest one. But
Hmm.
it also, when people don't understand the energy body archetypes, they may not realize that that one particular system type has a lot of overlap with
Hmm.
the expression of narcissist.
Oh, really?
So,
Okay. Well, how about you explain it just a little bit, this archetype a little bit, so that people can
sure.
tease out the two?
Absolutely. So, okay, the energy body archetypes kind of it's where how the energy sits in your energy body
Okay.
and
Okay.
how it controls and governs your expressions, the way that
Okay.
you perceive life, what you like, what you don't like, etc.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's one particular system type that is very strong. Their energy is kind of packed into the center
Hmm.
of them. And
Hmm.
it's different from a narcissist because a
Hmm.
narcissist's energy body has a slight inversion. So
Makes
it's going
sense.
to
Hmm.
pull energy in. It's not
Hmm.
really going to exchange and
Hmm.
have that
Hmm.
circular motion
Right.
where you're really perceiving others and
Hmm.
interacting in a, balanced and healthy
Yeah.
kind of way.
Right.
But this system type is different because their energy is simply like really densely packed. I call it the
I see.
post. It's like a
Okay.
post
Yeah.
and
Like
it's
our
down in the ground.
foundation. Yeah.
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 So you're
Okay.
not moving them, right?
Okay.
And
Yep.
so it can kind of feel tough. And also, the reason that I parse it out, like if I'm working with someone who's like, I've had interactions with someone who, has narcissistic traits, I parse it out because of how you're going to interact with the person can be different, and
Hmm.
your healing journey can be different depending on what you're actually interacting with. But
Hmm.
say, for example, something like consideration. Well,
Hmm.
that's not something that a narcissist really has, and
Not
for
at all.
this particular system type, they don't have that as a predominant feature. It's one of the way back in the way
Mm-hmm.
they
They
don't
can
really
be
think about
considerate, but it's just in the back. It's
it.
not a
It's
forward feature.
right. So where if you point out like, hey, she doesn't like it like that, they'll say, oh, really? Like they just didn't notice,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or
Hmm.
you could say, I want it this way, and they'll be like, why? Like it just
Right.
wouldn't have occurred to
Right. Right.
But the challenge is that the four other system types don't really like we don't really notice a lot of the times on the front end, especially when we're little, that we have that latitude to say, hey, wait a minute, what
Hmm.
about me?
Hmm.
And so it's almost like the experience of being railroaded, right? Is what
Right.
it can feel like.
Right.
So I parse it out for people that I work with because the direction that we take in the repair and healing work is going to be different. Because
Hmm.
if somebody is dealing with a true narcissist, then they're going to be needing to develop more, like, I guess you would say, a thicker skin
Hmm.
and a
Hmm.
way
Hmm.
of like resourcing themselves
Right.
because that
Right.
person is not going to exchange resourcing with them. But if
Right.
you're dealing
That
with
makes sense.
somebody who's like a post archetype, and then that way we know to develop and strengthen the parts of them that need to stand up and say,
Hmm.
hey, I'm here too, right?
Hmm. Well, and it sounds like too the biggest difference, and I heard it right at the beginning, is with the narcissist, all of the energy seems to be focused inward on them. And I think
Well,
for a lot of
that
right,
happens with the post one too.
right.
So,
Well, yeah, which can be confusing, but like you said, the consideration part, like a narcissist would be like, what? What's consideration?
yes,
What? Okay, whatever. Whereas it sounds like a post would be like, oh, I didn't even think about that.
that's right.
And that probably is the key factor there, right? For people to be able to say, okay, you're a post, you're not a narcissist. We can deal with that, right?
Yeah, because the post has a lot of kind of narcissist overlap
Yeah,
traits.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, it's more easy to contend with, right?
Got
And
it.
it's
Got
not
it.
as toxic,
Hmm.
even though that particular system type will require like that their own cup gets filled first before they start putting energy into anybody else's cup.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense though. It's kind of like um, with the DSM-4, you have to have five
Mhm.
characteristics in order to be a narcissist.
Right,
Whereas you can have narcissistic tendencies.
right.
And that's what it sounds like in regards to this energy type. This post is okay, I got to fill my cup first. But I also look at that as okay, we're in an emergency in an airplane and
That's right.
the air comes down. And of course, you put on your air first
Yes,
because the time that it takes for you to put air on somebody else, you might pass out. And that's not a good thing. It's like, um, if
yes.
we all go down, if I go down, we all go down type of thing. So that makes sense.
And
But that's not narcissistic. That
that's right.
phrase isn't narcissistic. Got it. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so what it can do is if a person is willing to heal from having dealt with that all the time, being railroaded,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then they
Hmm.
can get to a point where they can see that this system type is actually teaching us. The
Right.
four other system types need a little bit more of that. Sometimes
Right.
we give, on a very low running cup,
Right.
and then we can end up with resentment and things like that, right? So the post doesn't generally have very much resentment.
Right. No, and I think that's good because I think that for a lot of people, at least in my experience, especially with having a foundational member, like my mother being a narcissist, I started catching up with that because of the sensitivity and the intuition, which we'll go in a little bit more in regards to energy and the psyche. But I started saying, oh God, that person's a narcissist. And I started saying that everyone was a narcissist
Yeah.
when there could be narcissistic tendencies. Maybe that person was selfish. Maybe they just didn't know,
Yeah.
right? And they weren't picking up on stuff. There could be a hundred things that this person are the person's experiencing, and that main factor with a narcissist is they don't ever want to repair.
That's
Like
correct.
that is like the key factor for, I think, for everyone is
Yeah.
there might be gaslighting, which, I by no sense of the matter is saying yes, you should, be down for that. But there's
Right.
gaslighting. They're always throwing it back on you, where it sounds like this specific archetype might feel similar, but is not quite the same.
That's correct. They do
Okay.
draw energy towards them. They are
Hmm.
their predominant care
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
concern, first and
Hmm.
foremost.
Hmm. Yeah.
They are tough.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
also have a core intrinsic need of conflict, which
Oh,
makes
interesting.
which makes it harder for
It's
the
really
four other
interesting.
system types to contend with because they actually bond via
In
conflict.
conflict. That's really interesting. I can't wait to dig in more to this because it is really like the for people to understand this, I think is going to be a really good for them. And
Yeah,
it's kind of like a charcuterie board. You take what you like and leave what you don't,
that's
and
right.
that's totally fine. So, how do you now understand this sensitivity and intuition through the lens of energy and the psyche?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'll just say one little piece about this, kind of a little story to add
Mm-hmm.
in.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I was little, and like I said, 90% of my family members are this system type, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
what I felt was like they were just little tanks. And they were
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
play bumper cars with one another. It was like this intensity, and I felt like a kitten on the
yeah, in
field,
the
and
middle
I'm
of
like,
it.
trying to
That's
run
good. Yeah,
away. Yeah.
yeah.
And so like there was that sensitivity. And I mean, even, at 2 years old, which was my first memory, I remember that being a prevailing feeling when I was, at family
Mhm,
members' houses. I would
mhm.
go underneath the table
Oh,
because just like
wow.
I
Okay.
needed to
It
feel
was a
safe.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and even at 2 years old, I remember like that was my one of my first memories, and I remember that being just a very familiar experience. Like I had been doing that for well over a year, so
Makes sense.
because
Yeah.
people would walk in and they would say, "Where's Heather?" And they would say, "Oh, she's under the table." You know,
That's
I
so
create
funny.
I
Yeah.
created my own cave.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that was like at my grandma's house.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
extended family would come over. In my own home, it was very peaceful and quiet.
Yeah.
So
What energy, so you said most of your, family or extended family are post, but what energy then are you like predominantly?
yeah, so I do like I'm like the sprinkler. Like I
Mm.
overgive. So
Okay. Mhm.
it's not a super great connection to have people who are like, let me fill my own
Yeah.
cup first.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, let me give first.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there's not really that reciprocation that comes in.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes sense. When you came into this work, it
Mhm.
was through your own health challenges. So can you share kind of what that period of your life looked like?
Definitely. So I had no idea that my daughter was a post.
Oh,
And
daughters.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when she hit those teen years, I mean, it changed in like literally the snap of a finger, and
Hmm.
my whole world fell apart.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
started having massive anxiety. I mean, panic attacks like crazy. It felt like my energy field fractured and then started to like pieces started to fall apart.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
went through the doctors and got medicine, did counseling, and none of it really worked well. I mean, I remember when they were like raising the dosage of the anxiety medicine, it would work for that first week. And
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
the two
And then come
subsequent
back.
weeks
Yeah.
that they had to wait, it was like I was taking a water pill, you know, it just didn't do anything. And then once we reached like full max for my body weight, it worked for a while and then it just stopped working. Like my
Mm-hmm.
anxiety was just crazy high. I had no idea that my kid needed friction.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea that all throughout her life before then, I was not providing her with that need,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like her need
Mm-hmm.
wasn't getting met because I'm a very non-confrontational. I'm a
Right.
resolver. Like,
Right.
let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. And she was ended up depleted in resource, and so in one fell swoop, tried to get all of her conflicts in, you know,
That's
in
fair.
a matter of months.
Yeah.
So
That's
it
fair.
was kind of like bombs were blasting, you know,
Right.
and the medicine, you know, just stopped working. The counseling was fine. I mean, I enjoy counseling. Talking with someone
Yeah.
is lovely, but it surely didn't do anything for my body.
Right.
Um, and at some point, I told the counselor, I was like, you know, I really do enjoy these sessions. However, it feels like there's electricity running underneath my skin. It's just like this constant
Yeah. Yeah.
intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And she referred me to her friend who was a counselor that had a sound therapy table.
Oh, okay.
And so I laid on that thing. It's like a hard reverberation, and they
Yeah.
played like
Yeah.
healing music. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh. I felt like all of the stress had been drained out of my body in one moment. I felt like a cloud. I was so
Wow.
light when getting up
And
off of
and then
that.
that's when you kind of made that connection. You were like, okay, there's something here.
So I was just enjoying that for a while. And then after about 2 months, I saw an ad for someone doing energy work, and it was like energy rebalancing. And I was like, I don't know
Mm.
what that is, but I need my energy rebalanced. So
That's
I started
fair.
going to my first healer and started learning about energy work. And I guess that's what you call a conscious mind awakening,
Mm-hmm.
where I
Mm-hmm.
was naturally already interacting with spirit. I had some very
Mm-hmm.
energetic interactions in previous romantic relationships that
Mm-hmm.
were
Mm-hmm.
just like, what is this? No one ever
Mm-hmm.
talks about these kinds of things, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But my mind didn't really know. I didn't have a framework or a verbiage for it. And so when I found energy work, it really rounded out all of the theology that I had learned
Mm-hmm.
when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my goodness, this is the practical application of spirituality. This kind of stuff is how
Interesting.
Jesus
Yeah.
did all of
Yeah.
the things that he
Yeah.
did. And I think at some point I got disappointed with religion because I realized in hindsight that when I was little in church and, you know, they're teaching that Jesus said, you can do all of these things that I have done and more. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, let's learn this. And then
Right.
they like never taught it, you know?
Right. Right.
Um, it just didn't really occur to me that, like, no, I want to do that. Like, I actually want to
Yeah,
learn
how do
these
I do
things.
it? Yeah, how do I do it? And I think that's really it's an important thing, I think, for a I have found a lot of women who are going through this in the group are definitely religious,
Yeah,
and they find um, that religion is really helpful to them up to a certain point because what they found too is that it's also being used against them as they're trying to heal from a
yeah,
narcissist.
yeah,
So then they say, okay, God is all knowing. There is this energy. He loves us. But then there's also, I have to honor my parents and honor my mother and my father. So they have this real conflict. So if they're able to kind of tease out this energy part to
that's right.
understand, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And theology and religion is still really important to me. And I'm going
Yeah.
to hold it here and I'm going to hold this energy here. They can do both. And I think that's one of the things I wanted people to understand is again, charcuterie board. Choose what you want from it.
Yeah.
Some people might want the cheese, some people might not, and that's totally fair. How did self-healing turn into a profession for you?
I think it was about after I had my fifth certification. I
Mhm.
think it was my mom who was like, well, are you actually ever going to use those certifications?
Thanks, mom.
I was like, oh, it didn't even occur to me. I was going through these trainings for my own knowledge and for my own health and my own curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And when she mentioned that, I was like, oh, I mean, I could offer it. I don't know if people would want this, you know?
That's really cool. And for listeners new to it, like I am, to energy work, how can you describe the energy body? And you kind of did a little bit, but in really like simple terms, like
Sure.
this and that, like how you describe the post, but just the energy body as a whole.
So the part of the energy body, I mean, the part of the energy field that I focus on is the energy body. And so if you imagine your
Okay.
body itself as sort of like a hologram,
Okay.
or like a general outline, every little piece of that, every little tiny piece of it has a matrix of sorts, right? It has
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
programming and it builds the physical body.
Got it.
So
Okay.
what you're seeing is the physical expression of your energy body,
Right.
right?
Right. I
But
got it.
the energy body is sort of like the blueprint. But
Mm-hmm.
then between the energy body and the physical body, then you create the mental body or the psyche,
Okay.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
it can
Mm-hmm.
create like the energy body creates all the programs. It creates those neural pathways through the brain and the heart
Mm-hmm.
processes and
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Right.
And then from those three, we build off the emotions, right? Because of
Okay.
course the
Mm-hmm.
emotions need the endocrine system and all your little
Mm-hmm.
hormones
Mm-hmm.
excretions, but that's coming from the programs that are in the energy body,
Okay,
right?
that makes sense. And it makes sense to me why you think of things like unprocessed trauma and how
Yeah.
they show up in the energy body. But then how can, two different people from two different families, two different locations, two different parts of the world have a very similar reaction to that? So tell
Yeah.
me, how does like this unprocessed trauma show up in the energy body for you, that you see?
So I did not learn this until like about 5 years ago. I didn't learn this in class. I was actually in my energy body. I had some, they call it a download when you get like a sudden realization of a
Mhm,
particular energy tool. And
mhm,
at that point, my energy tools I had kind of hit a glass ceiling with, which means they weren't
mhm,
really working for me
mhm,
properly
mhm,
anymore.
mhm, mhm.
And I still believe in energy work. I saw the results for years
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
But I put a message out to Spirit and I was like, actually, I want tools that will work faster
Mm,
and
mhm,
more consistently.
mhm,
So I
mhm,
just got the awareness to do this particular type of energy work. So I started doing it on my system. And after a little while, I started realizing, wait a minute, this is melting. Like this
mhm.
is like what's happening is my energy body is having things melted off of it. And I started to realize the framework that trauma is frozen energy on the
Mm,
energy body,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And it creates that looping pattern. It creates all the intensities that feel like salt in a wound, right? When you
Mhm,
have that salt
mhm,
in a wound, feeling like something additional happens that is
mhm,
patterned from
mhm,
events that happened before. What's happening is it's creating more frozen energy. And so the more frozen energy on an energy body, the less range of motion in life they have, right? Their options become a little bit more limited, their
yeah, yeah.
perspectives become a
Mhm,
little
mhm,
like more pigeonholed, and it's almost like resource yourself first. Like you can
mhm,
only handle your primary like needs if you just
mhm.
went through a major trauma.
And that makes sense because if you think about it, right, from a sense of, okay, there's a traumatic experience. And like, so what you just said, I'll transfer it to like the work that, or the way that I vocalize it and the work that we do. We can say, okay, you experience a trauma. Of course, you're going to be hyper vigilant.
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to feel a certain way, or of course, you're going to have to create that pattern when that you feel this, or you're going to freeze, or whatever it is. So it's just like an addition. Like my son has these little toys. Well, he's 14 now, so he had
Right.
these little toys where there were little shells on them, like little robots. So it's like an extra added shell for
Yes.
people to understand. Okay, why do I still feel this way if I'm healing from this trauma? Oh, there might be a little bit more.
Yeah.
Let me dig into it. That makes sense. That's really
And
interesting. Go for it.
trauma's expression is different for different people, or it's different for different situations, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to talk about it, like
Yeah.
you have to call this friend and say it over and again, and then you have to call this friend and say the same thing
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like it feels like it needs to be heard. That's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
frozen energy. If you feel like you cannot talk about it at all,
Mm-hmm.
likewise, it's just,
That
frozen
makes
energy.
sense. That
And
definitely
one of
makes sense.
Yeah, and one of the ways that I like frame it is that like the painful emotions are actually different. Like if you think of like say it snowed a lot outside and then
Right.
it kind of congealed into one big old blob, in there you might have sticks and leaves and maybe
Mm-hmm.
little critters and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
those little things are the painful emotions that got
Mm-hmm.
stuck. The
Mm-hmm.
white frozen energy is our own energy. So
Mm-hmm.
over time, more and more trauma ends up making us feel exhausted and like we have
Mm-hmm.
less bandwidth. Our brain doesn't process quite as much.
Mm-hmm.
So when you begin defrosting, you get your own energy back.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
those little pieces, as those fragments come out of that frozen part, it just sloughs off naturally. And
Right.
you just don't have that emotion there anymore, which is
Right.
downright startling because
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
had a trauma in my teen years that was so graphic and so complex PTSD
Mm-hmm.
that I would have never believed that that pain could go away
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that my brain wouldn't process things the way that it did.
Mm-hmm.
And I repressed consciously and actively for over 25 years,
Mm-hmm.
all of that jazz, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't think about it even for one split second. Otherwise, the nightmares would start coming back.
Mm-hmm.
My body would flush hot. I would
Mm-hmm.
like do everything I can to get away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started defrosting for that and those actual emotions were just gone,
Mm-hmm.
I almost couldn't believe it that it can
Mm-hmm.
work on something that extreme, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that for a lot of people, I was having this conversation with my husband where I said, a lot of my childhood I don't remember. Like you mentioned, oh, I remember being under, at 2 under the table. And
Right.
there are like pictures of me like playing under the table or coming out like playing peekaboo, but I don't remember any of that.
Yeah,
And it's really really interesting to me that that occurs, but and of course it does because your body, your brain try to protect you from those complex traumas that you have and you experience. So I really appreciate the fact that this kind of work, again, charcuterie board, this kind of work could really help some women that have experienced some really horrible things at the hands of their mother. You know,
absolutely.
why is gentleness such a critical part of healing, especially when it comes to survivors of narcissism or of emotionally unsafe parenting?
Well, I know for me, again, I'm not a system type that enjoys conflict or
Yeah, yeah,
pain or suffering, right?
yeah.
So, since we've already experienced the pain or suffering, we don't want more of that. And sometimes,
Hmm.
even talking about an old situation to kind of map it out and process it is painful, right?
Hmm.
So, we can be kind of as gentle as we can, but you know how sometimes, like if you have the flu or something, even the
Yeah.
slightest touch to your skin can
Oh
feel
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so it's like I personally look for the most gentle processes because that's how I want it. I want
Hmm.
it super gentle.
Right. Many daughters of narcissistic mothers grow up in a really hyper aware, hyper vigilant state, and especially when it comes to others' emotions. So, how do you distinguish between that intuition and the trauma based hypervigilance when you're looking and working with people?
So a lot of the time what happens is that there's something called the narcissist empath dynamic, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And okay, so the formation of we can say frame it this way. This is one angle to look at it.
Okay.
So when someone is in a state of trauma, they will, on some degree, either become a narcissist or an empath. It's
Hmm.
just a response of the
Hmm.
energy body.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the
Hmm.
empath will spread out like a net around its
Hmm.
energy body to get little reads and feels. And
Mm-hmm.
what it can do is perceive sort of in advance, give them a little bit of an indicator and a time to
Mm-hmm.
process how to approach this. So
Mm-hmm.
an empath can feel into different people, different situations,
Mm-hmm.
and know what to do in order to keep themselves safe.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a
Mm-hmm.
narcissist, instead of spreading out, it pulls in and creates
Mm-hmm.
that like slight little inversion and
Mm-hmm.
basically demands its needs getting met all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And is basically, but both systems are basically in a state of, I don't get my needs met.
Right. And they look the same, but they're not the same.
They're not the same. And the
Mm-hmm.
energy body does something, very different. And
Mm-hmm.
we do, take a different healing approach to each, though people who are narcissists don't generally,
Yeah.
come
It's like
towards.
it's so funny because I was talking to someone and I try not to roll my eyes because I've been no contact from my mom for about 10 years now. But I
Yeah.
always laugh when someone says, "Oh, my mom said that she'll go to therapy now." I was like, "Okay." Like because
Yeah.
I remember what it triggers in me is, being in high school, expressing to the therapist there, the counselor there, my mom is crazy because I didn't have the verbiage for it. My mom's crazy. She's doing this. She makes me think different things. Like I'll say something and then she makes me question it. And the
Yeah.
counselor was like, let's have your mom come in. It'll be fine. I was like, okay, this is not normal teenager stuff, but all right, if that's what you want to try. And she came in and my mom was like, oh, sweetie, I love you. I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, you psychopath. Like, oh
Yes.
my gosh. And so for me, that's a real trigger. And I find it really interesting. And I'm going to ask you a question while I look for this one quote that I found
Okay.
that explains things really interestingly. But tell me, what are some of the signs that someone's intuitive abilities were shaped by survival?
So intuition in like a, pure sense, we call it in energy space a clear channel, right? If you're
Hmm.
getting a clear ping or a clear read, it does not have emotion attached to it. So
Okay.
if
Hmm.
you're having an emotion, it's it's not that you're not getting data. You are getting data. It's just that it's hitting up on your own wounding, right?
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
whenever we operate, feel, and then react out of our own wounds, it creates further distortion, right? Personally, I prefer to just like keep my mouth shut and ponder and like
Hmm.
process internally. But then again, if you're dealing with a post, they're going to want to fight immediately.
It's so interesting. Like I'm thinking back and I'm like, oh my gosh, who in my life reposts? And like, I think that that's such an interesting way to think about it. Like you mentioned, like they're dug in the ground. It's their way or no way in a very, like not in a sense of like they're being jerks, but like they know what
Right.
they like and that's
Yes.
what they like. They like what they like. And
And they
that's
want what they want.
yeah, and they want what they want. And I totally get that because it makes me think of, okay, um, I guess this is a question then. Is a person born into their energy body or is it shaped by others or by trauma? And can energy bodies change?
So your energy body is the operating system. So you are born with that. But
Okay.
certainly the wounds and who else you're around can shape your expressions of that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I mean, I do believe a lot of narcissists were sort of born that way,
Hmm. Hmm.
because I believe a lot happens before we incarnate.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we have like our own ways of handling things, and I call that's a soul issue, like that's an
Yeah, yeah,
overarching thing that's
yeah.
going to be there for them for their whole life. And so is the case oftenly with empaths, right? So you're probably slated for a good amount of wounding. And I do believe
Mhm.
we choose our wounding. And I do believe that there's a time where a lot of people can come to a point where they're like, okay, I'm ready to resolve this, right?
Right.
And then your soul motivates you to hear certain things and learn about certain things and be interested in certain things. But yeah, so the archetype itself is the operating system. So that's how it was
Got it.
designed.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me, how can survivors begin to rebuild their own trust? Now, like once they know what their energy source is or their energy field, make sure correct me if I'm saying it wrong. Um, Once they know what their inner being is, how can they start to rebuild their trust to know where they need to go? Because I know for survivors, trust is a really hard thing, even their own self trust.
Yeah, for sure. So that's going to be hard to do with a lot of frozen energy on your system. So I
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
recommend defrosting first. And I do have a free offer on my
Oh,
website for
cool.
a little
Okay.
mini energy transmission. You just put it on repeat, put the volume down, and let it play all night long while you're sleeping. It's like the
Okay.
super easiest way. And
Okay.
I actually still do that for myself each night. And then
No.
I
Okay.
have like a selection on my website. So, like the trauma of abuse, the trauma of neglect, the trauma of heartbreak,
Hmm. Hmm.
of
Hmm.
betrayal, a lot of the different ones that where if you know that you have that pattern, I would defrost for that for
Hmm.
sure.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, and then it starts to melt away. You get your own energy back. So you have more clarity about how to approach things. More options will present for you, like the very correct person for you to work with potentially could land in your life, or you
Hmm.
could start
Hmm.
following a channel that has all kind of posts that are just teaching you exactly the things that you need.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I highly recommend defrosting first and foremost.
That's really helpful. I think that, you're really talking about creating a safe space or container where clients can really be themselves. So,
Yes.
what does this actually look like in practice? So, we've kind of talked a little bit about it, but um, maybe give us a taste so that people know what they might be expecting if they do some work with you.
Sure. Yeah. So quite frankly, the little energy transmissions are it's like
Mhm.
my lowest price offer, but it's going
Mhm.
to be the most effective.
Okay.
Coming into session with me and having talk sessions,
Hmm.
um, it can help get the conscious mind on board and get some
Hmm. Hmm.
clarity and some
Hmm.
direction. But the audio transmissions is what's going to do the actual shifting. And
Hmm.
so I usually don't even recommend packages if somebody
Hmm.
wants to work
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
me, like, more than one, once a time here and there. I'm
Hmm.
happy to create,
Right.
packages or whatever.
Right. Right.
But I would say just buy one session and come share your heart. And I will offer insight, guidance, education,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
definitely recommend
Yeah.
an energy transmission or two.
That's fantastic. Why do you believe that fix it model of modern and definitely Western healing often causes more harm than good?
Mainly because they don't know what they're trying to fix it to.
Yes.
They have an incorrect perception of what
Right.
fixing it looks like.
Right.
Um, and I prefer the concept of like homeostasis, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Bringing your system back to the way it naturally operates
Hmm.
is the
Hmm.
objective.
Hmm. Hmm.
So fixing it, I think, is sort of like, I mean, in a more rudimentary or basic way of thinking about that, somebody would say, I just want this fixed because I don't want to feel bad anymore. And in that
Hmm.
instance, we can make that happen for sure.
That
But
makes
we're not
sense.
trying
Yeah.
to fix you, we're just trying to bring you back to your original.
That really makes sense. And I said I was looking for something because we were talking briefly about, usually narcissists don't come to get fixed or healed, very different from what you're talking about in regards to a post.
Mhm.
And what I saw something somebody had posted that not all narcissists are sociopaths,
That's
but
correct.
all sociopaths are narcissists. And
Probably
I
so,
thought
yeah.
that, yeah, and I thought that was really interesting because it kind of helps tease out what that actually is. If you got five of the, five or plus of what's in the DSM-5, you're a freaking narcissist in my book. Like that's the way that it
Sure.
is. So, um, so tell me so you talked a little bit about your offering online, the audio part.
Yeah.
How can someone tell when they're really pushing themselves? versus moving into that alignment?
I would say if your emotions get heightened, if there's a sense of urgency or a sense
Hmm.
of failure,
Hmm. Hmm.
then you might be being a little too hard on yourself and pushing.
Hmm.
And what I would say to that is, I know when painful situations are very active and something is hurting, you want it to feel better sooner.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but when we push like that, and it kind of feels like we need this now, or like we're kind of
Hmm. Hmm.
almost screaming energetically, I feel like we could miss the very thing that's right in front of us. So, like taking a moment, taking a breath, trying to come to just like a little pause
Hmm.
and like clearly state what you do want,
Hmm.
like I guess you would call it prayer at this point, right? It's like,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
setting an intention out into the universe or
Right,
whatever it is.
right.
I would say pray for clarity.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
if and every time I've done this, it has come through, right? It's like the
Hmm.
easiest prayer for the universe to answer.
Right,
It comes
right.
through if you pray for clarity rather than a resolution
Hmm.
or a
Hmm.
specific end result. Sometimes the end result's going to look different
Hmm.
than what we think that it is now. So if you pray for clarity, you can get the next step. You know,
Hmm.
Another
Hmm.
thing that I would pray for before I knew, how to do energy work was an open door. If an
Hmm.
opportunity was like just not presenting itself and I needed an open door, I would pray for it. And sometimes it would come only in the nick of time, and that was
Right.
frustrating.
Yes,
But
I will tell you, the prayers that I've sent out in the world, I have this wonderful, wonderful, so we're Catholic, and I have this wonderful um priest that I deal with, and he's like, you just got to keep at it. That's what it's at. And I wanted to pick up on something that you said in regards to, before you're reincarnated and you come back. I always tease my husband that um we finally found each other in this lifetime. And it took a little while,
yeah,
right? I mean, it's not like we were old, we were in our 30s
yeah.
and we found each other. And although his kids and my kids aren't biologically connected, they might as well be. They're just
Oh,
so
that's
similar and they
wonderful.
look alike. And so it's really interesting. Oh, excuse me.
You.
Oh my goodness, I'll cut that out. Oh,
Yeah.
excuse me. Um, I find it really interesting because I look at pictures of them when they were little, and especially my oldest and his middle daughter. They like look and they have very similar understandings. And I shared, I think, with one of these last episodes, where I knew that my husband and I were going to be, well, I knew right away, but he's crazy handsome and tall and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I really knew because, when you bring children into it that are from other relationships, um, we were at my grandmother-in-law's, and it was the first time my daughter was meeting everyone, and she was very upset. She was having really big feelings about it. And I was like, you got to get it together, woman. Like, get it together, and we're going in. Like, this is like, you really got to stop crying. I wasn't very sensitive to her being upset, but that's a whole nother story. And we can visit that when she's on the
Sure.
podcast. But I remember her meeting his grandmother for the first time. And she said to her in Spanish, oh my gosh, you look like so much like your mom. And she saw, you're home, you're home. And she gave her a hug. And I just saw my daughter just melt right into her.
Oh,
And I was like, oh my gosh, all that stuff that I was like, oh, this is hokey. I don't believe that, there are any of those things. I was like, yes, this is the energy. This is the way that it's going to be.
oh
So
yeah.
I appreciate it. This is really interesting. And I find that energy creates or energy attracts other energy.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. Can you tell me, what does joyful healing look like in real life?
Oh man. So I actually I say that when you really get it and when it really clicks,
Yeah.
sometimes it's just kind of matter of fact. It's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
I did that and it happened. You know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not quite as like, I don't know, exciting and bouncing. It really
Yeah.
feels more like peace
Mm-hmm.
and steadiness
Mm-hmm.
and maturity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. Can you tell me, what do you wish more people understood about sensitivity and intuition?
Oh, everything. I, I do. I'm grateful that we have a world that's talking about this more, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And I wish more sensitives could know at an earlier age
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that it's okay and that to set your
Mm-hmm.
sights on what you want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ensure your own resourcing and don't just tolerate other people's stuff, you know. But
Yeah.
as far as what other people would, what I would want them to know is that if your child is shy,
Mm-hmm.
they feel terror. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not a pleasant experience.
Mm-hmm.
Don't push them. They're
Mm-hmm.
already in a
Mm-hmm.
heightened state of anxiety,
Right.
and medicine may not be the first thing to grab.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Tools, teaching them tools at a younger age is definitely ideal. And
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
cannot wait for the education system to
Mm-hmm.
finally pick up and start
Yeah.
implementing some really good things for our
I,
kids.
I definitely, in a perfect world, we would move away from the industrial revolution when it comes to school.
Yeah.
Bells ringing, we have to be there at a certain time. I understood why they did it back then, but one of the best classes I ever took at university I went to Santa Clara University, was we talked about this and how education is affected by that. And so when I really got into education and education advocacy, I talked about, we got to feed our kids. We
Yeah.
got to give them all a baseline for them to be able to do what they feel is best for them. You
Yes.
know, I'm going to close with this question because I think it's a question that's on a lot of narcissistic daughters' minds. What would you want a daughter who feels too much to hear? Like she's been told she's too much nonstop by her mother, and by others around her, other flying monkeys. What would you want her to hear?
I would say that always remember that when you're out in the world and you're on your own and you can create your group of friends to be what you want them to be. And I wish I had been told this, more, but to be choiceful,
Mm,
to interview and vet your friends and
mhm,
cultivate high quality friends, because there are people who really want all of you. And I had
mhm,
a friend a couple years ago, we were having this conversation where somebody in her family kind of expressed that she was like a little too much for them.
mhm,
And I told her, you're never too much for me. I never, never,
mhm,
never feel that,
mhm,
no matter what your experience is.
mhm, mhm,
And it felt, I could feel how healing that was for her. So
mhm,
I would just want people to know that there are people who can be with you in
mhm,
all of the ways that you could ever potentially be.
mhm,
And
mhm,
be able to handle that. And so look at the people who can't,
mhm,
who
mhm,
complain, as their lack of capacity. They don't have the
mhm,
full capacity to handle
mhm.
all of
I really love that because, you know, if we think of people as energy, there are, like you said, specific energies that mesh really well together.
you. Yes.
So when they don't mesh well, like we can talk about the posts. We can say that that's too much for me. But for me, when, someone is, we can say set in their ways or they like what they like and that's what it is. I don't see that as a negative. I see that as someone who's very firm in the way that they like things.
Yes.
And that's okay. And that's okay. As
Absolutely.
long as they're not causing harm, I'm good with that. Right.
That's right.
So
I concur. Yes.
um, I I love that this conversation. This is so, I loved it, and I would love to have you back on so
Oh,
we could
yeah.
like dig deeper into stuff. And Heather, I'm so glad that our paths cross each other in a very unique and organic way. You have been delightful, and I enjoyed our conversation. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
It's just always a pleasure to speak about these topics. They're close to my heart,
Mhm.
and all things energy work is my jam. So
I
thank
love
you for
it.
having me.
I'm glad I could help you with your jam. So great. Thank you. And then in our show notes, just for everyone, we'll have offerings and more information about Heather so you can get into contact with her. Great. Thank you. If this conversation opens something up for you, just notice that your healing isn't just in your mind, it lives in your body too, and it deserves space to move. Thank you for listening to the Beyond Mommy Dearest podcast. You're not broken, you adapted. Healing from a narcissistic mother is real, possible, and you never have to do it with shame. I'm your host, Nolani Pearl Hernandez, and until next time, take gentle care of yourself.
Your skin is a part of your nervous system, and taking care of it is essential to overall balance. Our products are specifically formulated to nourish your skin and bring it closer to homeostasis with every use. Start feeling better in your body today with the Happy Cannabis.